Wood block, I take a wood block and I drill a 3/8 hole in it, and this comes in really handy. Glock, M&P, Tanfoglio, doesn't matter what you're working on. I can lay a slide or frame over it, drive a pin out, and not have to worry about doing it in a vise and having the pin fall to the floor and trying to find it, things like that, because, well, it falls through. I tip the block out, I grab my part later on. I don't have to worry about losing roll pins and tiny springs and things like that. Okay, tools. We're going to need a 3/32 roll pin punch. This will do the majority of the work on the gun. 1/16 roll pin punch if your gun has an ambidextrous safety that has a very, very small roll pin through it, as you'll see in a bit. A thin pair of needleless pliers for picking up and grabbing small things inside the frame. Hammer. I prefer to use something a little bit heavier like this, not a small, lightweight gunsmith style hammer, because with a heavier hammer I can choke up on the handle more if I need to, but more importantly I can use gentle taps, which are much less likely to miss and strike the side of the gun instead of the punch, and still move things because I have more force. I find it works better than using a light hammer and swinging for the fences. A pair of scissors and a couple of Q-tips. Those are going together. We're going to cut down a couple of Q-tips to use as slave pins to make reinstalling things much, much easier. Thin, small pick. I use an old dental pick. That works really, really well for moving tiny things inside the frame. And of course, like I said, a couple of Q-tips. You want those just in general for cleaning guns, but more importantly right now, they make great tools to cut into tiny little pins the size we need. So let's get started. Step one is going to be like most everything else. We're going to push the firing pin down, and I simply then rock the punch forward to start the cover plate moving. Release, and work this off the rest of the way, like so. Set that aside, and slowly release the firing pin and slide it out. Now, this will not fall out yet, but what it will do when I push that in is take pressure off the spring, and let me simply slide in here, twist, and pull the firing pin spring out. Set that aside as well. And now, I'm keeping my thumb over this so I don't want to lose, because I don't want to lose the spring, and there is my striker block, firing pin block and spring. All right, so we're going to take a 3/32 roll pin punch, which, by the way, a roll pin punch has a small raised bump in the center, like so. That keeps it centered on the hollow roll pin and keeps it from walking around as you drive something in or out. So I'm centered the slide over the hole, the roll pin over the hole, rather, and we simply drive it out. And keeping my thumb on the side of the extractor, work it back out, and let pressure off slowly, and out comes my extractor and the extractor spring. This guy torn the slide apart. Let's do the fun half. Okay, very first thing you do, if your gun has an ambidextrous safety, is take this roll pin right here out of the gun. Tiny little itty bitty 1/16 punch and a few taps. And I simply take that safety and work it off the side of the gun. So let's relocate that spring tip. Trick way to do this, I picked this up on one of the gun forums, is to take a fine gauge hypodermic needle. If you have a friend who's diabetic and regularly gives themselves insulin shots, or know a nurse or two, they might be able to hook you up. This is a 20 gauge, and I have carefully dulled the tip of this needle so that I cannot stab myself with it easily. I did that by stabbing myself easily right here on the index finger while the camera was conveniently off. So we're going to, now that it's been nicely dulled, slide it over the end of that spring, move it up, pull it off to the side, and voila. So spring is now off the safety, which means that with a good push right here, the safety will come out the side of the gun. And now I have the hammer back. Pulling back on the hammer further will take a little bit of pressure off the sear assembly, the sear cage, and I can work this out the side of the gun, like so, and set aside. Okay, now with my thumb still holding back on the hammer, if I let it go forward, sear cage jumps out of the gun in its complete assembled entirety. This pin right here, and push it up out the top of the frame. It's no longer captive. It was resting underneath the sear assembly right here so that it could not come out. Boom, that easy. I'm going to push down a little bit and slide it the rest of the way to the side of the gun. And now I'll go find it. I'm going to leave the punch in the frame. Okay, hammer pin has been located at my feet. Placed inconvenient near my storage. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is grip the hammer, push again straight down toward the magazine well, and slide the punch out slowly, and ease the hammer up slow. So my hammer and my disconnector will come out as a single piece. Polo disconnector in your gun. This wiggle that you can see here is a good thing. It lets the sear dictate the reset and takes the pre-travel out of the gun. So with mine, that means if I want to split these, I can simply push this pin clean out very easily, like so. A normal Tanfo, the factory parts, there's a roll pin in here that you have to hammer out if you want to split the two. But I'll go ahead and take them apart now. I just wanted to show that to you guys. And we'll set all of this aside for now. My gun's fitted with a trigger pin from CGW, that's Cajun Gunworks, made for the Canic line of pistols. It drops right into a Tanfo and makes the disassembly very, very easily. I don't have a roll pin that I have to hammer out. I can simply push it out with a punch by hand. Glock Armor's tool will just drive it clean out. Downside, just so you know, is that the trigger has some side-to-side rock because the pin is thinner in the center than the factory roll pin. If that doesn't bother you, because you will not notice it when you're shooting, put one in your gun. They're great. Make it easy to take apart. But let's pretend that I'm like the rest of you and I have a factory gun with a roll pin here. So I'm going to take a 3/32 punch, place it here, and simply drive it. A common mistake is to lose a spring right now. If I take this punch and I just rip it out the side of the gun, the trigger spring is going to go sailing into the wild blue yonder, and it will go very far, and it is very small. So what I'm going to do instead, there are a couple different ways you can do this. You can flip the frame over like this if you have solid grips and not ones full of holes. Cover the mag well and pull the punch out, and it'll bing, bing, bing. You'll hear it bounce around, but it can't go anywhere. What I like to do is simply take a napkin or something like that, pack it in here nice and tight, and slowly slide the pin out and ease pressure off. And boom. Okay. That also works very well out in the field. If you don't have anything flat to set this down, you can take the gun apart. So now I can take this trigger spring out of the frame here. There's my trigger spring. Damn, Megan has punches. There's my trigger spring. Set her aside and get the trigger bar out of the gun. So all I have to do there is lift the front of it up a little bit and slide it forward and out. And we're running out of parts in the frame. I'm going to take this and just rip it out the top of the frame. Literally grab it with pliers and pull it out. When I do that, the magazine catch is not going to be captured in any way. And the little spring that's hiding in this hole with a plunger in front of it is going to potentially shoot out like a missile. So what I'm going to do is put my thumb over this end, which is where the spring can come out, and the plunger, and hold on to the mag catch on this side. So I'm containing everything. And simply grip the head of the trigger bar plunger with needleless pliers and pull it firmly straight out the top of the gun, like so. My gun is set up for a lefty. You'll notice that my button's on the wrong side. So what I'm going to do is slide this out the wrong side of the frame compared to the rest of you guys. So I'm going to push with my thumb and slide it out toward the knurled end. This assembly goes more or less like this. And if you simply grab that plunger with the pliers and yank it out the top, this little plunger here is liable to go flying out the side of the gun, never to be seen again. My advice when you're buying parts for this gun, buy a couple of these and a couple of these and at least one spare trigger and sear spring. They're easy. The sear spring is easy to damage when you put the gun together wrong. The rest of the parts are easy to lose. Keep those in your field kit, because if you take this thing apart at the range and you lose one, it's great to have spares of the tiny thing. Okay guys, we now have a completely quote-unquote bare frame. There's nothing left in here. So if you're gonna start doing trigger work, you're gonna start polishing things, this is where we wanna get. And you notice you do not have to take the grips off the gun. Both with the Hennings, the factory wood grips, and with the scales, I've used them all. I was able to take the gun apart, take the ambi safety off without removing a grip panel. Okay, so I've done a bunch of set it aside steps here so far. Here's all my asides. Okay, let's start taking these apart. If you are going to polish this, you may want to take the trigger off the trigger bar. I personally did not. I didn't really see a need to, but you can simply drive that roll pin out. If you are replacing your disconnector as covered, you would need to knock this roll pin out. If you're changing the hammer and the disconnector, you need to drive this roll pin out and drive this roll pin out and replace your hammer with, I have a Titan here. You might want to use a Delta. I would center the sear pin over the hole here and simply use a small punch and do a little bit of wiggling and ease everything out. And the sear spring doesn't usually go flying, but to guarantee that it will not, I'm going to put my thumb in this hole here, grip the sear on the bottom there so I've covered everywhere it might go, and slowly pull the punch out. Now everything should just fall apart and out the bottom of the sear cage, like so. You'll have more parts if you have a 2-piece sear, but otherwise it works exactly the same. Trigger bar plunger assembly, you can see mine's been rather extensively polished, especially the top of the head. That's what she said. But what I need to do to take this apart so that I can polish it up is pretty simple. When you push these two together, I'm going to, when I push this all the way down, expose a small pin that I need to slide out the side. Side note, this is the older, easier style of gun. I apologize if you have the new one with an E-clip in there or whatever they're using now. But however it works, the premise remains the same. I need to push the plunger down, the head of the plunger here down, enough to expose whatever's on the end of this shaft. So what I get to do with the easier style of gun is to push down. It's gonna be hard to do so you guys can see, and push this little pin out with a small punch. I'm actually using one that's even smaller than the 1/16 inch roll punch I told you needed. A paper clip works well for this, by the way. This tiny pin immediately gets placed somewhere where I won't lose it. Now, push down, slowly slide your punch out, and slowly release pressure. And 1, 2, 3. We have a whole gaggle of parts here. You might be a little overwhelmed at this point. You might be going, oh, well, this is just like my CZ or whatever else I own. In either case, putting it back together is pretty simple. We're just gonna go step by step, so don't worry about it. It's a very easy gun to work on.